Hello and welcome. My name's Michelle Rasmussen and I am a Senior Instructional Designer with ASCENT. We're here today to talk a little bit about what is in the AutoCAD Civil 3D grading book that I wrote last year. Just to give you a little bit of a background about me, I have been using the Autodesk product since release 9. I've been teaching it since 2000, and last year I became the first ACI as well as ACE worldwide for AutoCAD Civil 3D. So let's talk a little bit about the summary of the book. It starts out with an introduction to grading, where we talk a bit about styles, settings, and sites to help you understand how that all works together in the software. Then we talk about parcel grading, and the parcel grading is the absolute simplest grading in the book. We talk a little bit about setting elevations to parcel lines and using those in a surface as a break line. We also talk about feature lines and editing the surface. Next, we talk a bit about building pad design, and for anyone that has looked at the 2013 Fundamentals Guide for Civil 3D, this is very similar to the grading exercise that's in that book. It's a simple building pad where we use a simple grading object to grade out to the surface and then create some infill, and then we balance the cut and fill using the grading volume tools. Next, we talk a bit about parking lot design, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more complex because we actually do some transitional grading and stepped offsets and a little bit more complex information going on in there. Then we go into grading a pond. This is using a complex grading object where we have different grades going on at different times, grading one object off of the other. Then the absolute most complex exercise in the book is the lagoon grading, and because of its complexity I've chosen to use alignments and profiles to create a corridor and do the grading with the corridor. Then we combine all the surfaces together using data shortcuts, and we take a look at it when we visualize everything together by assigning materials to the Civil 3D objects, assigning materials to layers, and doing some rendering. So let's take a closer look at each one of them. So like I said, the first chapter is the introduction to grading, and we talk quite a bit about grading styles. We actually create a grading group style. We create slope patterns for that style. We create feature line styles, and we create surface styles to help us understand what's actually happening as we're grading our site. Then we go in and we start creating some grading criteria so that we can set specific standards for the types of gradings we're doing. For instance, if I always want a 3:1 slope on the interior of my pond, I can go in and lock that so that somebody creating the pond doesn't have to think about the standard. It's already set. They just go and use that specific criteria. We do go through and specify each of the items within the grading object, so you'll understand what's the slope face, where the feature lines are, the target and daylight lines, base lines, and the center mark. We also talk a little bit about the difference between the slope pattern and projection lines, so that as you're going through that, you can understand what you're looking at. Not only that, but we also talk about setting all of those feature lines and grading group lines to a no print layer so that when you go to print the project, you don't have to look at those slope line patterns. All you really want when you print are the contours. And so we talk a bit about setting the style up so that you can see everything when you're in the drawing and in the 3D model, but then when you print, it prints just those contours that you need for the contractor. Last but not least, we talk about sites, why it's so important for you to have the feature lines in the same site with the grading group so that everything works together. The next chapter is our parcel grading, and when we talk about the parcel grading, we have a complex situation going on. For instance, you can see in the picture here, we have the street on the far right that basically shows the crown of the road and the curb and gutter and sidewalk, but then we're going to go from that sidewalk up a 4% grade to the front of the house. That makes sure that we have a nice drainage going off of the house and everything's not settling at the foundation. Then we have a minimum of 7-foot wall for the basement, but the basement is a walkout basement in the back, so we need to create feature lines that act as break lines for that basement. And then from the basement we do a 2% grade out to the back of the lot. And with all of that, we do that with parcel lines, setting elevations with it, and we go through and create feature lines that act as the break lines for the wall. Let's actually take a look at it in the software. So when I take a look at this, you'll see that I have my parcel lines, and when I go into the elevation editor, it actually has elevations set. When I go to another lot, however, what you'll notice is you'll have some extra symbols in here. So for instance, here's my elevation points that I've added, and some other points that actually line up with another parcel and share the elevation of that other parcel. And so we talk a bit about why that happens, how that happens, and how you can avoid setting elevations more than once. And when I take a look at that surface in the object viewer, what you'll see is we have these nice break lines creating that walkout basement for us. And everything is sloping properly from the front to the back. The next exercise, again, we talk about building pad design. And one thing that I've done with the book is I've made sure that we start out very simple and work into more complex situations as we go. This does two things. For those that just have to do grading, you can go in and take this class and not have to worry about taking the 4-day fundamentals class in addition to it. The fundamentals class is highly recommended, but if grading is absolutely all that you do, you don't have to go through and sit through the 4 days. You can take the 2-day grading class and get the information that you need. Now with the grading pad design, for those of you that have taken the fundamentals class for 2013, you'll know that there is a grading exercise in there, and it's a very simple grading exercise. The building pad design is very similar to that exercise. We start out with a feature line of the building and then grade out to the surface, and then we go in and we use grading volume tools to balance the site. So let's take a look at that in the software. When you look at the building pad, you'll notice that the building has inside corners so that you can understand the software is going to take care of those inside corners. You can see over here where we had a little bit more fill area, it went ahead and did the cut and fill out to the point where it started filling upon itself, and then it just closed that in. In another area where it didn't need to grade upon itself, it just went and graded out to the surface. So you can see how it handles those interior and exterior corners as you're going through it. If I were to take a look at this building pad in the object viewer, you can see it is a nice little little pad, and whoops, there we go. And everything is grading up properly. Okay, so here's cut in this area, and we have a fill situation in this area. All right. So the next one, the next exercise is a parking lot design, and this is where we're going to get a little bit more complex because we're going to work with stepped offsets for feature lines to create those curb and gutter lines, and we're going to do some transitional grading. Around our parking lot, we are going to have a retaining wall on one side where we meet the building, and on the other side we will have a gradual slope out to going towards another right-of-way. And the reason that we do that is because the building is going to have a walkout to the parking lot at the second level, and then on the other side it just walks out to the existing ground. And so we build that parking lot up so that we have that option. And we do it with a retaining wall. So around the retaining wall we do have a 0.1-to-1 slope, and then on the other side I believe it's a 3-to-1 slope. So let's actually take a look at that. And there are some unusual conditions that are happening with that grading object that I want to talk a little bit about. So what you can see is if I looked at this grading object here and I went into the grading editor, you'll notice that that slope is a 2-to-1 slope. Then when I come around to this side, let me grab that grading object, you'll see in the grading editor that's a 0.1-to-1 slope, and then the very back side, oops, that's going to be the transitional one. There we go. We have again a 2-to-1 slope. Then in between where I have the 0.1-to-1 slope and the 2-to-1 slope, we've created a transitional grading, so it automatically knows to transition from 0.1-to-1 to 2-to-1, and the same thing down here when it starts with a 2-to-1 and then goes to the retaining wall. One thing you'll notice is we've got some contours that are doing something funky right here. I've left that exercise that way for a reason. You need to understand as you're doing grading in Civil 3D what needs to be fixed and what does not need to be fixed. And when you go and paste all your surfaces together using data shortcuts, what you'll find is the building surface is going to override just these triangles right here that are causing issues. And so when you have the finished product, you're not going to have that funky thing going on in this area. So you don't have to worry about wasting time correcting it if the surface you're pasting over top of it is going to take care of that. And so that's why I've left it that way, is to help you understand what needs to be corrected and what doesn't. But you can see very easily, here's the retaining wall, here's the 2-to-1 slope, and how nice it grades out. We also have the interior median here that we work around and actually create some stepped offsets for the curb and gutter all the way around the parking lot. Next we have the pond design, and the pond design that I've chosen is actually from an older fundamentals book. We had a very complex exercise in the fundamentals book, and I felt that it needed to come out of there. I felt like it needed to be in a more advanced book, and so I put a simpler grading object in the fundamentals book and pulled that advanced grading object into the advanced grading book. And so when you're going through doing the grading design, what you're going to do is you're going to take feature lines from the corridor and then grade out at a 1-to-1 slope until you reach elevation 180 on this side, and then grade to a 3-to-1 slope and a 2-to-1 slope till you hit the bottom of the pond. On the other side you have a 3-to-1 slope from a certain angle until you hit 180, and then you have a maintenance road that's at elevation 180, and you have a 3-to-1 slope from there and a 2-to-1 slope from there. And so when you do that very complex grading object, what you end up with is a very nice grading group. And let me show that to you. When I select that and go into the object viewer, what you'll see is you have something very complex with the road over here that you pulled the first feature line from, and a maintenance road on this side. And then the different slopes coming into the pond until it reaches the pond bottom. Now again, the very most complex is the lagoon grading, and because it is so complex, what we have is we have a pond with a northern bay and a southern bay, and then a weir in between the two bays to separate them. And so we actually use corridors to create that complex grading, and there's some secrets to working with corridors for grading. The first secret is, if you're working with an enclosed area, is making sure that you create the alignment properly. And I give a little tip in the book that talks about, using a line to actually go in and create that alignment. So you start with the midpoint of the line, go to the end point, wrap around the way you need to, and then go to the end point of the line and back to the midpoint, so that the beginning and ending stations line up on a straight line segment. That way, if you don't get anything funky. So for instance, if I had the beginning and ending station at a corner, all this area out here in the corner would end up with nothing there. And so we need to avoid that by starting and ending our alignment on a straight line segment. There's some funky things that you need to worry about with profile creation as well. First, since our beginning and ending station are the same point along the alignment, they're going to be the same elevation in the profile. So your elevations will start and end at the same elevation in that profile. The other thing to think about is where your profile ends. I don't know how many of you work with corridors, but whenever you create a corridor and something funky happens and your contours suddenly go to elevation 0 at the end of your corridor, it's because your finish ground profile does not extend past the end of your alignment, and the software doesn't know how to handle that, so it just goes out to elevation 0. To avoid that, what I recommend is that you actually end the finish ground profile beyond the alignment, so that you don't have gaps and you end up with contours going to elevation 0. When it comes to lagoon grading, I've gone in and I've talked about many of the different types of assemblies or sub-assemblies that you can use for grading. And specifically, I've talked about, which sub-assemblies are equal to the same thing that you can do with a grading object. So for instance, the link, width, and slope subassembly that we see here, that one is the exact same thing as grading to a distance with a grading object. Then the link, slope to surface subassembly is the same thing as grading to a surface with a grading object, and the link slopes to elevation is equal to grading to an elevation or a relative elevation with a grading object. And the reason I point that out is because those are just 3 of the sub-assemblies that you can use. There are many, many more that you can use, and in fact I talk about many of them. In fact, this is a list of all the different sub-assemblies that I talk about, but you only use a certain percent of them. So in the course we use the link, width, and slope, the link slopes to elevation, the daylight max width, daylight to offset, and a daylight bench. But the reason I've talked about the other ones is so that you understand how they work. That way, if you're an instructor and you're teaching a custom course and the client that you're working with needs to go a little bit more advanced than even what the exercise does that I've put in the course, you can do that by talking about what these other sub-assemblies will do and then actually to build an exercise to help them use them. So let's take a look at that grading for that exercise. First off, they do have to go in and create their alignments and their profiles, and you can see I have 3 different alignments. We've got the interior of the northern bay, the exterior of the entire pond, and then we also have the interior of the southern bay. So those 3 alignments are what we're going to be using to actually create the corridor. Now, just because I'm using 3 alignments does not mean that we are going to use 3 different corridors. We're going to actually use baselines and regions to help us create that corridor. And so let's take a look at this a little bit further along. In fact, we're going to go to the completed exercise. When I look at the properties of this corridor, one thing you'll notice is I do have that pond outer rim, and it's going to have 3 different assemblies or 3 different regions assigned to it. Then I have my northern bay, the interior, and I have 4 different assemblies, actually 3 assemblies assigned in 4 different regions. And then I have my South Bay where I have 3 different assemblies assigned in 3 different regions. And by splitting it up and adding everything together like I do, you have a nice finished exercise that has a nice finished pond. Now, one thing that you'll notice if I go back to the one that shows the alignments, I haven't done an alignment between the 2 ponds. That's because we're actually going to use feature lines to create the weir that goes in between them. Because you can do so much with the corridor, and then sometimes you have to add a little bit extra. And so I wanted to help you understand what to do in those most complex situations. Now I realize that you can have an even more complex situation than what I've done here, but at least you get the fundamentals of what you can do, and then you can expand upon that as you get more comfortable with grading objects and corridors for grading objects. Big reason why I like to use corridors when it comes to grading is the flexibility. For instance, part of the exercise is actually taking and extending the slope right here so that you have that certain slope out a little bit further in one specific spot. Maybe you need to I don't know, maybe add an inlet into it or something. I don't know. But by extending that out, it was very easy to go in and take just a region and assign a new subassembly or extend that subassembly out in one specific spot so that you don't have to recreate a complete grading solution. All right, and so if I take a look at this grading object in the object viewer, what you'll notice is I have my daylight subassembly that's going to step off. There's my bench subassembly basically. I have some different slopes going along in that South Bay. And then I have my nice weir that I used feature lines to create. And in this side I have a couple of different slopes going around where I needed it. Okay, so again, you're going to start out very simple, move to more complex. Let me go ahead and just show you some of the files that are behind this. When I go to open up a file, one thing you'll notice is that I have a different file for different parts of the exercise. Basically, I've created a data set for you that has the drawing up to date up to the task that you're on. So if something goes wrong, a drawing gets corrupt, or you miss a step and think, oh, I understand how to do that, I don't want to go back and redo it or something, it's very easy to just pick up right at that task and keep moving forward in the book so that you're not wasting time doing something you already understand, and you can just keep moving forward with the learning. Okay, so the data set does come with it. Basically, you'll download that from an FTP site, and it has everything that you would need. All right, so when it comes to combining all of those different grading pieces together into one finished ground, we're going to be using data shortcuts. And so we talk a bit about creating the data shortcuts and then bringing them into a new drawing where you're going to paste all of them together. And then we use the editing tools commands to help us make sure that the surfaces are in the right order, and you have the things overriding the right things. So for instance, that parking lot that had problems with the triangles, putting the building over top of it takes care of those triangular issues, and then the pond, and then adding in the road very last. And then we talk a little bit about visualization. And so we get into the visualization tools, looking at the model in 3D, using the view cube and the steering wheel to zoom around the model, and then setting preset views. We also talk about adding materials to your drawing. So if it's a Civil 3D object, we talk about adding materials to a Civil 3D object. If it's an AutoCAD object, such as the buildings, I've just taken and created 3D buildings out with 3D objects and added a layer that stands for our windows. And we talk about using the material browser to add materials to those 3D objects, as well as attaching materials to an entire layer. For instance, the windows in there, those are a bunch of rectangles that I've used for windows. And so you actually apply a glass material to an entire layer for those windows so that you get a nice reflective surface off of them. And we talk a little bit about the object properties and everything. When it's all said and done, we do a nice little rendering so that you can see how everything will look, and you'll be able to create a presentation to stakeholders just using what you've done in Civil 3D. So that's everything that is in the course. We really appreciate your feedback. I'm always looking to improve the courses that I work on, and you can send that feedback to the courseware@ascented.com email alias. You can also watch for additional information on our blogs. I am one of the blog contributors, and in fact, I think it was October or November, I wrote a blog specific to the Civil 3D grading course. So if you'd like additional information, go and check that out. And you can order the course, of course, from our ASCENT e-store. Keep in mind, we do have hard copy books that you can purchase and have sent to you. Or if you do buy an ebook, that comes to you immediately. You'll get an email that has the instructions for you to download the software, the Vital Source bookshelf software that you would use to open the book. And I really love the ebooks because you can take notes right in there. You have it wherever you go. You can put it on your iPad, your iPhone, and your laptop, or your PC. And whenever you open that course, if you opened it on your iPad last and added some notes, those notes are going to automatically be updated on your PC the next time you open that book on your PC. Not just that, but you can actually choose to share those notes with us by sharing the notes with courseware@ascented.com, and that gives us immediate feedback on things that you'd like to see improved in the book, additional exercises you'd like to see, and so on. So I want to thank you for your time in watching this webcast, and we hope to hear from you soon.